everyone, and welcome back to Sunday Reads with Renee. My name is Renee here at Simply Renee. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, clicking the notification bell to my channel, as well as commenting. I truly appreciate it as it helps my channel to grow. For this segment of Sunday Reads with Renee, I'm going to be going over the 10 best books I've read so far in 2026. And these books are going to focus more on my spring and winter reads of 2026, which I'll leave a link in the description for just my general thoughts on those books. And also, it's going to feature an array of thrillers, dramas, romance, comedy, as well as nonfiction books. I honestly wanted to put more books here because there are so many books that I read this year that I really enjoyed. But unfortunately, I just want to do 10 books overall that really stand out to me, ones that really captured me the most that I still think about even after the last page. I will, however, be leaving a list of the honorable mentions at the end of the video just so you can look at what I've chosen as an honorable mention. And I just want to say thank you again so much for always tuning in. Now, before I begin, I will be revealing plot details, so therefore spoilers are ahead. And also, I will be using alternative words and phrases just due to YouTube rules and regulations. Anatomy of an Alibi by Ashley Elston. Now, this is a book that I've highly recommended here on this channel before. In fact, I recommended it as one of 10 books for the summer season to read, and that's because it is the definition of a gripping thriller. It's a page turner, it's got a great mystery, it's got some twists and turns, interesting characters, and I really had a hard time putting it down because it was such a great book that really engrossed me and engaged me completely from the first page. It's a very good twisty thriller in a lot of ways. It's all about these two women named Camille and Aubrey. Camille is married while Aubrey is dealing with a haunted past, and Camille has some suspicions about her husband. When Camille and Aubrey meet, they get to talking a little bit and then decide to come up with this plan of creating a perfect alibi in which they swap identities for 12 hours so Camille can do some investigations into her husband. Then things go awry when Camille's husband ends up becoming eliminated violently. And as a result, there is a lot of twists and turns and unexpected circumstances that come up as they try to come up with the perfect alibi and really get down to the mystery of what exactly happened. And I really enjoyed this one because, again, it's a twisty page turner, twists, thrills, everything that you need for a gripping thriller. And this is one that I really enjoyed, and why, out of all the books I've read so far this year, this one was the one that truly sticks out to me in terms of mystery thrills, but also all the books in general. So that's why I put it here in the top 10 books that I've read so far that are best. The ending writes itself by Evelyn Clarke. Along with Anatomy of an Alibi, this is a newly published work in 2026 and is very much the definition of a gripping thriller mystery. And it's really one of the best books that I've read this year and why I put it in the top 10. It's all about these 6 struggling writers who've been brought over to a remote Scottish island in order to finish the ending for a popular author who has sadly passed away unexpectedly without finishing the final ending of his recent book. And as a result, these 6 struggling writers who are talented in their own way but haven't really got the recognition they deserve or gotten that place in the publishing world yet, see this as an opportunity because this gives them a chance to not only prove their talents, but they also win a huge cash prize at the end and get a chance to really make their way up in the publishing world. So these 6 struggling writers try to come up with an ending and spend several hours and more trying to really come up with the ending during the weekend, in which they're in a locked room mystery, which has a lot of twists and turns that are very unexpected throughout it. And the reason I enjoyed this the most, though, is because it has a lot of "and then there were none" Agatha Christie vibes. For anyone who is a fan of Agatha Christie like me, you're familiar with his most famous work, which is "And Then There Were None," which is all about these individuals who stay at a remote island voted by a mysterious guest where a lot of unexpected bloody situations come about. And this is what happens in The Ending Writes Itself, only it offers a lot of twists and turns. The ending wasn't something I expected, though. I honestly thought it would go in a different direction, so I was happily satisfied and surprised by the ending to this very bloody thriller mystery type book. And it's one that I recommend because it is engaging and engrossing with a lot of twists and turns. It's very much the definition of a gripping thriller, and I think you'll enjoy it for the summer season or just for reading it if you haven't yet. The Reservation by Rebecaa Kauffman. And this is a newly published work from 2026 that is a very good drama, introspective, personal journey type novel. And I really enjoyed this one because it's not all just one character or a couple characters. It's all about a group of staff members from different perspectives in the interchanging chapters, telling a little bit about their lives and how they got to where they are at this beautiful, fantastic upscale restaurant in the Midwest. Now, what happens is that it starts off the day where the assistant manager is going through the inventory like he usually does, checking on things, only to discover 22 steaks have gone missing for some reason. They don't know what happened to it, and it creates this whole mystery throughout the rest of the day, throughout the entire novel. And it's caused a little bit of a panic with the owner, who is already under a lot of pressure because they're going to be hosting Reservation for a famous author that night, and it's already a busy time as well. So as the owner goes through the mystery of interviewing all of her staff to see what exactly happened, they end up really coming to learn a little bit more about these staff members, everything from the prep cook to the pastry chef to the host. And they learn a lot about these individuals and their own introspective lives, their personal journeys, what they're going on. The story of the prep cook was the one that hit me very hard because it was just so heartbreaking for me, and it still gets me right here in the heart. But I really enjoyed this book overall. I thought it was engrossing, a page turner. It was interesting. I felt invested in these characters, whether I liked some of them or not. And I think it was just a very well written book. You can get through it very quickly. And it's a really interesting one also about the restaurant business. I worked in the restaurant business for a number of years, so I could relate to the setting and the scenes of just how everything gets prepped and corrected correctly and how they put everything together as well. So The Reservation is one that I do recommend, and it's also one that I really think is the best book that I've read so far. I enjoyed it. It was nice drama. It kept me engaged and engrossed, and it takes all the course over a single day as you learn a lot about these different people, how they connect with others, and just their own journeys. And those were the best parts for me. So this is really one of the best books that I've read this year in terms of drama and fiction. The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I don't, I apologize. But this is a 2014 novel that I read for the first time this year and truly liked. It's really one of the best books that I can think of that I've read so far this year. And the reason for that is because it's a very engrossing gothic thriller with supernatural elements, an excellent ghost story. I'm usually not too big on it, but how the author really wrote this is what really stood out to me and still does even months after the fact. Now, what the story goes is that it takes place between 1908 and the modern day in rural Vermont. In the modern day, a young woman named Ruthie is living off the grid with her mother and sister, and they end up living in this house that has a history of strange disappearance and supernatural elements. It was owned by a woman named Sarah, who lost her child tragically in 1908 and created all this supernatural elements that have haunted the house ever since. Now, for Ruthie, she's just trying to live her normal life when she ends up discovering a diary that belonged to Sarah from 1908, which uncovers a lot of connections to the house, strange disappearances that have happened in the town over the decades, as well as a connection to what could have happened to her mother, who ends up mysteriously vanishing. Now, what's interesting about this book is that it does flash back between the modern day and 1908 to help us get Sarah's perspective as well. And what Sarah's going through at that time in 1908 is that she's lost her child, Gertie, who is the only surviving child that she had, and she's understandably grieving this loss. And in order to really connect with her daughter and reunite with her, she turns to the local legends at that time, which are called quote unquote sleepers or spirits, to really try and connect with her daughter again and bring her back to life. And so it's an interesting story of how all these supernatural elements come together. It's really a gothic thriller with an excellent ghost story that really has a lot of these twists and turns, which is what made me liked it so much. There's no bad person necessarily, but there are a lot of people here who could be considered bad or just caught up in a lot of different things within this story they didn't expect. That's what I liked about it too, is that there's a lot of unexpected twists and turns that come along that really bind and connect everyone to this one single house in rural Vermont, which has a lot of tragedy attached to it, and how those in the modern day, especially Ruthie, really try to uncover the mysteries of everything, not only her mysterious disappearance of her mother Alice, but also what exactly happened in this house that connects it to Sarah and her deceased child Gertie. So it is an excellent page turner ghost story. I really enjoyed it, and it's really one of the best books that I've read this year. By Tayari Jones. This is a newly published work by Tayari Jones from her successful 2018 novel, An American Marriage, one of my top 20 books of all time. And this newly published work, which was about 8 years in the making, did not disappoint. It's an excellent, well-written book that really focuses on the bonds of motherhood, sisterhood, and the ties that bind in difficult times, especially a lot of social upheaval, racism, and Jim Crow South, along with civil rights. It's all about these two young women named Bernice and Annie. Now, these are two childhood friends who grew up together and have had a lot of traumatic experiences with their family and everything that's happened in their lives. And they're bound in that way because of those experiences. They get along pretty well, but they go off in different paths as adults. Bernice goes off to get an education at college, while Annie stays behind and tries to search for her biological mother who left her. And in order to do that, they go in different directions while experiencing a lot of ups and downs in life, along with the horrific legacy of racism in Jim Crow South, as well as the fight for civil rights, but also the things that bind them completely as sisters in their own way that creates this whole bond of sisterhood as well. This was a very engrossing, engaging book. It was hard for me to put down. I really liked it. Showed a lot about the complexities of individuals in Bernice and Annie and how different they are and similar from their experiences and who they are as people, but also about what they experienced together in terms of Jim Crow South and civil rights and the things they're going through as they grow up in 1950s and 1960 Louisiana and beyond. And this is really just an excellent book. I truly enjoyed it. It's an excellent fiction drama. And if you are a fan of Tayari Jones already, this is one that I highly recommend. And I think it's just a great work. It's really one of the best ones that I've read so far this year. It did not disappoint. I really liked everything about it. And I think it's just a really well-written book, and it won't disappoint you either. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Now, this is a very thick, classic novel from the 19th century that is one that I had on my to-be-read list for a long time. Finally decided to do it in spring. Took me roughly about 3 weeks to finish it, and I got through it pretty well, and it was a long read, trust me, but it's well worth it because it truly is considered one of the greatest revenge novels ever written, and I can see why. Basically, it's about this young man named Edmund who is living a sort of normal life as can be in the early 19th century. He's become a merchant, he's rising up in his field, he's just got a promotion, he's engaged. Things seems to be looking up for him, and he's really excited, looking forward to the future. But then something tragic happens where he is betrayed by people he knows and is close to, colleagues and individuals who are jealous of his success and his rising status in the community. And so they decide to falsely accuse him of treason. He ends up going to prison wrongly, and he ends up spending years in prison until he finally finds a way to escape and then plots his revenge, reinventing himself as a Count of Monte Cristo. And this is truly an excellent revenge novel. It's an interesting look at how an innocent young person who's living their life, doing fine on their own, just living their life normal until everything just falls apart completely, and how those actions of wrongful imprisonment and accusation and false accusations can change a person completely, where they have nothing left to lose but to plot out revenge in order to really get their revenge and feel like they can get some kind of justice. And that's another theme in the book that's interesting. It's not just revenge, it's also justice and what the status of justice means, and how sometimes you take justice into your own hands because the system already failed you. So it is an excellent, engrossing read. I found it quite hard to put down, but sometimes I had to just to get through certain pages because, again, it's a thick book. But I really enjoyed this one. It's an excellent classic work. I can't recommend it enough. I know it gets a little bit of overplay right now completely, but I do highly recommend it because it is a well-written work that does focus on those themes of justice, injustice, wrongful imprisonment, as well as revenge. So I can't recommend the Count of Monte Cristo enough, and it's truly one of the best books that I've read so far this year. The Great Contradiction by Joseph Ellis. And this is a nonfiction work published in late 2025 that I read this year in honor of the 250th anniversary of America's founding. And the reason for that is because while there were positives to America's founding, there was a tragic side to it as well, where despite our claims of fighting for freedom and liberty, we did leave out other people as well. In this case, we created this whole foundation of liberty and freedom, but we still had a contradiction to that, in which, despite these claims, we are still enslaving people and removing Indians off their land. So, despite all these great accomplishments and these good intentions that we had with the ideas of liberty, freedom, and independence, we aren't making it equal to everybody. And this is why I really enjoyed the nonfiction work, because what Ellis does is that he's trying to create an argument so that way we can create thought provoking discussion and just think a little bit more about things. And that's why I really liked this one, because it did make me think about things. I'm proud to be an American even with our flaws, but I can admit that even though I think it's great that we achieved independence and these wonderful ideals, there was a tragic side to it where it didn't include everyone, and the fight was much harder for them afterwards in 1776. And I think this is a good way of really having these discussions about it. The only downside to this book, and even Ellis mentions this, is that it talks more about enslavement and not enough about Indian removal or an equal amount. But according to Ellis, he found more about enslavement than he did about Indian removal. So I do think this is an excellent book to show the tragic side and the negative sides of the founding and have a conversation about it and how we interpret it and discuss it more as we go forward. Because for me, I think you can appreciate what the founding of America is, but you can also point out the negatives to it and have a discussion about it. I've talked about it here on this channel here, and I'll leave some links in the description just so you can get a bit of an idea. Although I try to keep politics out of my channel as much as possible, there are times where it's going to creep in when I read some nonfiction works and have a little bit of my own opinions about it, though I try not to bring it too much in. But other than that, The Great Contradiction is a great book. It's a very thought-provoking work that creates nice discussion and things to think about. So it's really one of the best that I've read this year, and I'd also recommend. On Morrison by Namwali Serperll. And this is a nonfiction work published in 2026 that is a critical analysis critique of Toni Morrison's works. For those of you unfamiliar with Toni Morrison, she is one of the great authors of the latter half of the 20th century, but also one of the great Black authors of the latter half of the 20th century. And she's well known for her most famous work, Beloved, as well as other great works such as The Bluest Eye and Song of Solomon, as well as Jazz. And Toni Morrison was an excellent writer. I've been a fan of her works for many years. I'm still finding new things about her. And On Morrison really gave me more introspective on her herself. And I also thought this was going to be more biography when I read the description. So I was surprised to see more critical analysis on a lot of her works featured in here, whether that was Beloved, Jazz, Song of Solomon, The Bluest Eye. But I truly enjoyed it because it gave me a little bit more perspective on Morrison, how her crafts was, how her influences came, what her upbringing was like that really influenced some of these great works, what her thought processes were in putting all these works together for us to enjoy. And it wasn't just her novels, it was also her plays and essays that do make their way in here along with her poems. And I think it was an excellent critique of her work that gave me a lot of things to think about, helped me to see Toni Morrison in a little bit more newer ways. But the one thing that I do disagree with, though, is the description in the book on how Morrison's persona really overshadows her works and what she was trying to say. I myself personally, of my own opinion, don't agree with that. I always thought of her as a great author, great writer. I could understand what she was talking about. And if I needed to understand more, I would look over these different critiques and analysis and essays about it, as well as some themes and what other discussions were happening as well. So for me, myself personally, I don't think Toni Morrison's persona overshadowed any of her works, at least from my perspective. I understood what she was talking about and appreciate what she gave to the literary world in terms of her works and her style and her ideas and thought processes. And On Morrison was a well-written, detailed look into that, and I truly appreciate all the work that went into it. And it's why it's one of the best books that I've read this year, because it's just excellent work, very detailed, well-researched, and it really gets at the heart of Toni Morrison and what she was trying to say and what she was trying to discuss in terms of her influences, her craft, and where she was going with all of her stories and what she was trying to convey as well in these stories with themes, characters, and different types of analysis and storylines. So it's really one of the best books that I've read so far this year. The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. And this is a 2026 published work that is the second book of the Say You'll Remember Me series. The first one, Say You'll Remember Me, was published in 2025, and I recommended that for a summer read this year as one of the 10 books for our summer season. And what I really liked about The Night We Met is that it was a great follow up to Say You'll Remember Me, but it's also very much a standalone novel. So even if you haven't read the previous book, you won't be missing too much plot holes in that completely. Now, The Night We Met is very much a romance book with some drama and personal growth as well. It's all about these two characters named Chris and Alyssa. They meet one night at a concert and they instantly are attracted to each other, but they never really come together and connect in the way they're supposed to because Alyssa looks over at Chris and kind of gets by his body language and his lack of speech and conversation that maybe he's just not interested in her. So she ends up turning to his best friend Mike instead, who's a little bit more charming and a little bit more social and such. So she ends up hitting it off with Mike more and they end up starting dating, which hurts Chris because he was attracted to Alyssa, but because he was going through some personal issues at that time, which he wasn't really expressing to anybody, even his closest friends, they didn't really connect and form that way, despite the fact that they are more compatible in a lot of ways. Now, what happens is a few months goes by and Chris ends up doing a favor for his friend Mike. He's feeling a little sick that morning because he has a hangover, and as a result, he asks Chris to do him a favor and take Alyssa to the hospital with her mother because she's getting surgery. So Chris, wanting to be a good friend, helps out Alyssa and he does this favor for Mike. And in that conversation at the hospital, they end up really getting to know each other, starting to bond and connect and end up forming a friendship. But it makes things complicated because Chris still has feelings for Alyssa, but he doesn't want to cross any lines completely because Mike is his best friend, even though Mike is having his own issues with alcohol and addiction and struggles within his own personal life and his career. Now, as a result, things start to take different twists and turns that Chris doesn't expect, and neither does Alyssa. They end up really connecting and growing closer than they want to because they don't want to hurt Mike. They do care about him very much, and they don't want to hurt him completely. And so it creates a lot of drama, love triangles, and it really creates a lot of interesting romance introspectives as well as connections, and it really focuses on personal journey between all the characters, including Mike. And I really think it is a great book. It's an excellent romance novel. I felt invested in these characters. I think it's actually better than Say You'll Remember Me in a lot of ways. And I do think The Night We Met is great. So if you haven't read it yet and you are a fan of Abby Jimenez, I do highly recommend it because it's one of the best books I've read this year. I think it's excellent, well-written romance. I liked the characters, even though I had some criticisms of them over certain things within the plots. But I get why things happened the way they did. And I truly appreciate this book because it really was a great romance novel and one of the best I've read so far this year. And Now Back to You by B.K. Borison. I liked Borison's previous work, First Time Caller, so I was very excited to read And Now Back to You because it is an excellent romance read that I thought was well written and engrossing and engaging, and it's really one of the best I've read so far this year. It's all about these two people named Jackson and Delilah who are rival meteorologists from different types of work environments. One's in radio, the other's on TV. Delilah is a very perky, upbeat person who is very good at her job, but she's really struggling in a toxic workplace, and she has a grandfather who's battling dementia, and she stays on TV because they grew up watching the station together, and it's the only way she can connect with her grandfather, who again is battling dementia, while Jackson is struggling to really read without a script and has a lot of anxiety and panic attacks about performing in front of a camera, but he's also someone who is taking on responsibilities as guardian of his underage sisters, and he's trying to take on those responsibilities. He's a bit more reserved as well. As a result, Jackson and Delilah are kind of enemies in their own way because they're rival meteorologists, but they're also very much opposites attract. Now, one day they end up having to be forced to work together on a joint project to cover a historic snowstorm that's about to hit, and they end up having to really work together in close quarters and try to get along as best they can. And they end up actually connecting and really hitting it off, and a romance starts to blossom between them. But because of other things going on with their different personalities, challenges, and personal issues, it may end up causing a lot of friction between them during their blossoming romance. But I really enjoyed And Now now back to you. I thought it was a great romance read. I liked this couple very much because they're an excellent, well-written enemies to lovers type, in my opinion. And I think they are great with their chemistry. They really hit it off, and they end up really going from there to see what can happen next. And I really enjoy this one. So it's a nice, engrossing romance read. It's one of the best I've read so far this year, and I really enjoyed it. So if you are a fan of PK Borison or you're looking for a great romance, I highly recommend this one because it's really, again, one of the best I've read this year. And this concludes the 10 best books I've read so far this year, and this is a list of the honorable mentions. And this concludes the video overall. Now tell me what you think. Have you read any of these books and what did you think of them? Do you agree with me, not agree with me? Are there other books I didn't mention at all in this video that you could recommend as being the best you've read so far this year? Please let me know down in the comments section. I welcome all discussions as always. And thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell. I'll be back on next Sunday with a Sunday Reads with Renee video, this time with a double book review. I'll be back on Wednesday with a regular video, on through Friday with a food video, as well as some shorts in between. I thank you again so much for always tuning in and being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.